I use she, her pronouns, and I serve as one of the program coordinators in the Office of the Vice Chancellor for Equity, Diversity, Inclusion at Vanderbilt University. I want to thank you all for coming today. Before we get into the content, I will ask everyone to keep their cameras and mics off until we get to the end of this call. We will have a short Q&A section after the discussion. Some of our attendees have submitted questions for our moderators in advance, and if we have time remaining, we will ask for questions from our virtual audience. During that time, feel free to raise your hand, whether it's just popping up your hand or using the raise hand function, and I will ask you to unmute your camera and or mic to ask our speakers your question. And I want to also make note that throughout the talk, if one of our speakers mentions something that should be beneficial for participants to learn more about, I'll try to find and share the link to said resource. And last thing, if you have any questions or issues before that Q&A section, feel free to send me, Hope Young, a private message. I'll try and get back to you as quickly as I can, being mindful of how many messages might come in from every moment. And so now I'd like to introduce our two speakers for this afternoon. So starting with Dr. Ariana Curtis. Dr. Ariana A. Curtis is the inaugural Director of Content for the Smithsonian's Our Shared Future, Reckoning with Our Racial Past initiative. She is also the first curator of Latinx Studies at the National Museum of African American History and Culture, where she is curator of the award-winning Latinx Collections Portal. Among her panels and keynotes, Ariana has spoken at South by Southwest, Politico Women Rule, and the Schomburg Center. Her TED Talk has over 3 million views. Ariana holds a doctorate in anthropology, is a Fulbright scholar, and a founding member of the Black Latinas Know Collective. And our other speaker is Dr. Nancy Lopez. Dr. Nancy Lopez is a professor of sociology at the University of New Mexico. Dr. Lopez co-founded and serves as director of the Institute for the Study of Race and Social Justice, and she is the founding coordinator of the New Mexico Statewide Race, Gender, Class Data Policy Consortium. At the University of New Mexico, Dr. Lopez currently serves as Associate VP for DEI. Dr. Lopez has been recognized through the American Sociological Association's William Foote White Distinguished Career Award for Sociological Practice in Public Sociology. Her current research includes the W.T. Grant Foundation and Hewlett Foundation funded project on the role of high school ethnic studies curriculum and culturally relevant pedagogy in reducing complex inequality, and the Robert Wood Johnson Foundation funded project entitled Employing an Intersectionality Framework and Revising Office of Management and Budget Standards for Collecting Administrative Race and Ethnicity Data. She has served on over 75 PhD MA committees and given over 130 seminars at national conferences, invited lectures, and community gatherings. Ladies, I want to thank you for both coming. And at this point, I will turn the discussion over to you.
Thank you, Hope. Hi, Nancy.
Saludos, cariño, ¿cómo estás?
Bien, bien. It's so good to see you. For those listening, I know Nancy, so this feels like a real special treat since we're on different sides of the country right now.
Absolutely, and I can't even thank Dr. Curtis, Ariana, enough because she really catalyzed my effort to connect broadly with communities through her Smithsonian Showcase invitation in 2014, was it?
Yes.
She reached out and invited me, and since then, it's just been transformative. So thank you for creating that space for me. It really made such a major difference.
Such a pleasure. So hopefully we'll get to that, and people are like, what are they even talking about? So I thought we would just start with just some personal background, just talk a little bit about like where we're from and how that shaped who we are today. I can start and then pass to you.
Sure.
All right. So I'm actually born and raised in Western Massachusetts. I currently live in the DC area, but New Englander through and through. My parents are New Yorkers. My dad and all of his siblings were born in Panama City, Panama, and he was raised in Queens. My mom is African American. She is proudly from Brooklyn. And so as the daughter of New Yorkers, and it's only like 2.5 hours from Springfield, Massachusetts, where I'm from, to New York. So we went to New York all of the time. So I grew up in a part of the country that's really densely Puerto Rican. I don't know how many people know that about Western Massachusetts or Southern New England, but very densely Puerto Rican. And then the town that I grew up in, I later learned, to label as a town of white ethnics. So people weren't white, they were Greek or Italian or Portuguese. There was real specificity to how people understood themselves and presented themselves. And so that was kind of the environment that I up in, like a Black diverse home. We absolutely understood that both of my parents were Black, but from different countries, um, and just a broader sense of the world. So I grew up in New England, always in New York. And we went to like protests. I remember going to like anti-apartheid protests with my mom and the Million Woman March in Philadelphia. So that was kind of the world in which I grew up in. What about you, Nancy?
That's very similar, but somewhat different. So I was born and raised in the Lower East Side in Manhattan, New York City, 1969. My parents are immigrants from the Dominican Republic. And everything I know, I owe them, because one of the things my mom would always say, a Black Dominicana, to her 5 kids whenever we faced injustice, and she has a second grade education, but again, and my dad as well, no dejes que nadie robe tu derecho, and how her stories of navigating anti-Blackness, not only in the Dominican Republic, but when she arrived here working in the factories in the Lower East Side, sustained me, because it helped me understand that there were structures in place to treat our communities, and particularly those of us who are street race Black. In other words, you know, if we're walking down the street or we're out in public, we're racialized as Black very differently, right?
Yeah.
And that was not the case for my dad, who is a very light-skinned Dominicano. And so just seeing all the levels of racism being executed in my family, but also in the larger community, really propelled me. So I went to de facto segregated public schools. I graduated from one of the last public high schools in New York City, 4,000 students, that was all girl. And part of the reason I do what I do is because that experience really opened my eyes about structural inequities, and really fired me to continue doing work in this area. I grew up in a mostly Puerto Rican neighborhood, so of course everyone automatically assumed that.
Absolutely.
So I was one of the few Dominicanas, right? But again, just an incredible space to grow, because literally across the street there were co-ops that were also, there were a lot of immigrants there, but they were all white looking, right? So I did note there were white Latinos who lived there, and some of whom were in the projects and were able to access that housing. But certainly those that look like us did not have access. So you see massive wealth gaps that are racialized because of this housing discrimination that is still going on in a more discreet way.
For sure. One of the things I think for me one of the things that influenced me about growing up in such a densely Puerto Rican part of the country was that I saw Puerto Ricans of all shades. And I think especially because I grew up in an English speaking household, English only, that seeing or understanding that there's some Puerto Ricans who spoke Spanish, some who didn't, like color and language were not tied to anyone's sense of Latinidad or belonging. And I think, you know, being shaped in that even outside of my own family was really powerful for me. Because I know some people, when they talk about Afro-Latinidad, and it came up in a talk that I gave earlier this week, where people were saying like, oh, I didn't feel Black enough for like the African Americans, and I was too dark for the other Latinx folks that live near me. But that wasn't the case for me. One, because I am African American, so that representation fit. But I just grew up in such a multiracial, you know, multilingual space that I think having that when I went away to college, because I went to Duke in North Carolina, which was so far from anything comfortable for me or anything known, it really did feel like culture shock. But having that strong sense of self and who I was, I think really helped secure how I identified myself throughout my entire life. And I know not everyone had that growing up.
Yes, absolutely. Being surrounded by my family on my mom's side, all of whom are Black Dominicans, was really powerful. Being raised by my grandmother as well gave me a strong sense of self and a strong sense of pride. I was also wondering what drew you to anthropology. It's interesting that we're both social scientists, are working, you know, in an area that is incredibly powerful, because it actually shapes what we do, not only in K-12, but also in higher ed. But why anthropology? I'm very curious.
So I was blessed with a really great advisor in undergrad. So I was recruited into the Mellon Mays undergraduate fellowship program, which leads people of color towards the academy. So I thought I was going to be pre-law when I went to Duke, and I ended up, you know, going on this path to get a doctorate. But the major that I had in undergrad was interdisciplinary. So it was just geographic. So my, geographic areas of study were the United States and Latin America and the Caribbean. So I could take any classes in any discipline that the university offered, as long as it, met in these geographic areas. So when I was thinking about graduate school, I was like, I have no idea, right? Like I haven't had to be discipline specific in my training up until that point. And I actually thought I wanted to go to grad school for poli sci. I was just like, oh, I'm going to be a political scientist. Like this makes absolute sense. And my advisor was like, listen, I know you. I've worked with you for all of these years. You will be very unhappy. The way that you want to find out information, like the research methods that you value, are not poli sci. You really should look more at anthropology. I don't think you've realized how many anthropology courses you've actually taken. But look at that, look at those research methods and see how that feels for you. And so I did have a gap between undergrad and graduate school, and she was absolutely right. I cold called a lot of professors, I emailed people, I talked to different students in different departments, and absolutely cultural anthropology was like the best fit for how I wanted to find information, right? Particularly human subjects research being so central. What about you? You're in my sister discipline of sociology.
So interestingly enough, I only had one sociology class as an undergrad, and it was U.S. racial and ethnic minorities. And I remember one lesson that was about racialized social networks that really just hit me in thinking about the myth of meritocracy and how anti-Blackness works in hiring and all these other dimensions. I was actually pre-med, but I knew that I was interested in other fields. So my final major was Latin American studies. So I took much more literature classes than sociology, obviously. I also took political science, economics, but I found that sociology allowed me to ask the types of questions that were of interest to me, trying to understand things like segregation, educational inequity. And I remember I was at Columbia at the time in the 1980s, and we had 3 Latino groups. One was called, Chicano Caucus, which had existed. It was probably the oldest group. Then there was ALA, which was Alianza Latinoamericana, which I would also belong to. But then at some point, maybe the second year I was there, Acción Boricua was born, and I would often go there. And that was where mostly the Afro-Latinos were, right? And so it created a space of reflection and action around issues of race and gender. And in fact, one of the speakers we brought in, and the only Puerto Rican professors that were brought in was through that organization, was Clara Rodriguez, a sociologist who wrote Puerto Ricans in the United States, who herself describes herself as a light-skinned Boricua, but very clear about the difference that race as a social status makes in terms of inequities, whether it's housing, income, wages, et cetera. So again, practicing that solidarity, right? Embracing all of Afro-Latinidad and also working towards liberation. And then the Dominican Studies Institute, I met Ramona Hernandez, and again, she's also a sociologist who has done tremendous work to create a space for knowledge production on our community. So yeah. I think sociology just became a natural home for me for all those reasons. But having people like Baca Zinn and Zambrana as well, engaging in intersectional work in solidarity, I think really created a space for me.
Yeah, I think what you hit on, the knowledge production part, right? So for people unfamiliar, that's really what that's a better way to say, like, who is involved in the production of knowledge, right? And the fact that so often we're not part of these studies, like we're not thought of in the framework of studies. We're not thought to be experts in our own communities. We don't need to be given voice. We have voice. We just need people to listen to what we're actually saying. And so, my advisor knew that was more what I wanted to do. Like, yes, I'm interested in how policies affect people, but I'm interested in people speaking about that themselves because they know, right, better than academics about how this actually affects their everyday lives. So, I think I'm known as the everyday lady because of my TED Talk, but I think so much of that is my anthropological training and just understanding that, the way people live their lives makes sense to them, until we just need to figure out how it is that we all make sense to each other and not privileging one experience over others. So yeah, that production of knowledge piece and how we involve people in that is so critical.
I'm interested in learning a little bit about your domain. So I'm in a typical university, right? A research one. You're in a professional space, right? That is oftentimes very white. So it could be difficult for us, right, to have our knowledge production honored and included. What interventions are you able to make in your workplace? And how has your presence and training disrupted the status quo? And I'll just share very briefly, I just came from a meeting of the Faculty Senate Curricular Committee, which is related to our institution of the US and Global Diversity and Inclusion requirement, and all the efforts, how that was born of struggle. And even 8, 9, 10 years later, we're still struggling over who controls the curriculum and how power dynamics play a role in reproducing inequality in our curriculum or not. So I'm just curious, in your neck of the woods, what that looks like, and what ways are you creating interventions?
Yeah, so it's interesting because I remember emailing Hope like, am I in the academy? Because sometimes people include Smithsonian as part of it, sometimes not. Um, so there's these layers to how I work and where I work, which I think are really meaningful to just articulate. So my curatorial home is the National Museum of African American History and Culture. That is a Black affirming space. It is a racially inclusive space, right? It is a space born of Black struggle. One of the exhibitions in the main level of the museum is called A Century in the Making, right? Like how long it took for the idea of having something honoring African Americans on the National Mall to the actual creation and opening of this museum. But when we met, I was working at the Anacostia Community Museum, which is the only community museum in the Smithsonian system, located in the predominantly Black neighborhood of Washington, D.C. and Anacostia, right? A different kind of mission, a different kind of feel. But those have been my two curatorial homes within this predominantly white institution. And so I felt like when I was called to do institutional service, which was pretty often, that I knew that was the perspective that I was bringing, right? That the communities that I represented, the communities that claim me as their own, are not what we consider our traditional Smithsonian audience. And so it was really important that I be there and not shy away from reminding people that we are a large institution that serves more than just the audience that they may know. So that's one thing. And I think too, just bringing Latinidad into those spaces as the first curator of Latino studies for each of those museums has just been critical. One, to show that we were already there, represented in their collections, but maybe not named that way. And just opening space for different kinds of personal identifications, different cultural spaces, different frameworks and categories that include us more than they traditionally have. But I think especially when I am now in Smithsonian Central, just recognizing how unusual the predominantly Black affirming spaces are, that really shaped me as a professional, and just making sure that I'm reminding people like, this is also the Smithsonian. It's not just the Air and Space Museum. Anacostia is equally a Smithsonian museum. Making sure that as we talk about we, that we're actually including all of us. But it has to be similar. I mean, similar and different for you.
Yes, very different, actually.
I was hoping there were some spaces of affirmation there for you too.
Without a doubt. So New Mexico is a state that is predominantly of color, meaning, half of the state identifies as Hispanic and about 10% indigenous. And then there's smaller percentages of Black identified, not necessarily Afro-Latino, but also Asian. So our institutions remain predominantly white when you look at the power structure. So sure, our undergraduate population is extremely diverse, right? Not graduation though, right? And then also at the graduate level, it gets even less diverse, right? But when you look at who sits in positions of power as chair of departments, who sits in positions of power as dean, as provost, et cetera, it still remains a predominantly white institution, right? If we look at power relations. So one of the ways that I've tried to create a space and an insurgent space in the institution was in 2009, co-founded and still direct the Institute for the Study of Race and Social Justice. And so even though the institution hasn't provided dedicated support, we have co-conspirators that, for instance, allow us to provide the first graduate certificate in the country, interdisciplinary, on race and social justice, 5 classes across 4 different disciplines. And that was an innovation that came out not just from Nancy Lopez, but a convergence of scholars across the university who said, why don't we have a space for all scholars of race and social justice, whether you're in art history or in philosophy or in biology, anti-racism and biology or sociology, to talk about curricular innovations that are necessary, research projects that are community-based and responsive to the policy needs of the community, like the ethnic studies project that was related. So that innovation has made a difference. And again, if we wait for the money, oftentimes these innovations can't happen. So one takeaway I want you to think about is how can you leverage that liberation capital? And Alden Morris talks about this in Scholar Denied and W.E.B. Du Bois' Atlanta School of Sociology, even when there's no support, find a way. The other thing we did was through the Diversity Council, institute a preferred criteria for all faculty hires. We're working to institutionalize that for all staff on demonstrated commitment to equity and inclusion. So it's not enough to say, oh, I think this is a beautiful idea. Show us what evidence you have that you have a demonstrated commitment in your service, your research and teaching, community engagement, et cetera. And so the last thing I'll mention is because of this work, there will be pushback. I've had many program officers tell me that intersectionality is analytical laziness and that we should focus on race or gender or class, but not all those things together.
Nobody lives those things together.
Yes. And these are federal funding agencies in many cases. But fortunately, some of the foundations like the W.T. Grant and also the Robert Wood Johnson Foundation are actually embracing this idea that we can employ an intersectionality framework for creating change or rigorous research that allows us to institutionalize policy change. And that's why I'm so excited about the possibility of producing research that shows that we need to revise the Office of Management guidelines on race and ethnicity so that we're not conflating race and ethnicity, and that we produce a data infrastructure that allows us to make racialized inequities visible and actionable, especially anti-Blackness within the Latino community. So this idea, oh, you know, Latinos are all the same. No, we're not. And that has material consequences for us. Right. So yeah, that's how I've tried to transform and to make a change even when there's massive resistance.
Two things that you said that I just wanted to pick up on. One is the demonstrated commitment. And so for people unfamiliar with museums, one of the reasons that I am so loud and proud about being a curator is because we're kind of considered central to like the intellectual engine of museum work, but also the public faces of it. And so when you're talking about, you know, a demonstrated commitment, I'm thinking, okay, well, we're building collections that the Smithsonian is committing to preserving forever, right? So having a curatorial position in Latinx studies at the National Museum of African American History and Culture is not audience outreach. It's saying this is part of the intellectual foundation of this institution. And I think that's really powerful to note about where diversity happens in these spaces and what is the consequence of that. And then the other thing that you said that I think that I've really grown into since taking this, what we call a detail, like I'm on loan to another part of the Smithsonian for this race initiative, is, you know, that the Smithsonian brand is currency and we're quasi-federal, right? So as you're talking about, you know, these are the roadblocks that you're finding in terms of, you know, federal categorization. Well, we're quasi-federal. So how is it that we are making sure that we and other agencies are leading the way in what we know to be true, particularly around race and ethnicity? Because this is also parallel to our cataloging processes of material culture, right? Like how we call people in the confines of that carry over into how we label like the tangible material culture. And so I think, you know, as I'm thinking about what can I do, what do I bring to the larger field, it's like, well, the Smithsonian is a validator, right? Like what we do as an institution sometimes makes it okay for smaller museums or just other institutions that don't have that same kind of name recognition. And so for the race initiative, especially, I'm thinking, okay, well, this is my chance to spend the Smithsonian currency in a space of racial justice. And what does that look like? And how do we collaborate? So I'm really interested to know, I know you've already started talking about it, Nancy, but how have you built community in these different spaces that you've occupied to push these things through, particularly when there hasn't necessarily been funding for it?
Yeah, so one way that we do that again is by convening people from across sectors, right? So when we have an Institute for the Study of Race and Social Justice meeting, it's usually referring to something that's going on right now. So for instance, on Tuesday, we will have the Deputy Secretary of the Public Education Department come and share with us the revisions that they're making to the social studies standards in K-12. Why is that such an important place to make an intervention, a policy intervention that creates rigorous curriculum that talks about identity, about power relations, about history, about structural violence that our communities have resisted. So one way to create that community is to create a convergence space. So we do these monthly meetings. Now, this has been severely impacted during COVID.
Yeah, I can imagine.
So you could imagine in the past, we could have hosted a conference with 400 people, like the Critical Race Studies and Education Conference. But now a lot of this is taking place virtually until further notice. But that doesn't mean that you can't continue to create community. We also started a Latinx Faculty Alliance here during COVID, believe it or not. And it's quite interesting that you see a color line, right? When you see who's working part-time, who doesn't have tenure, who's the lowest paid even with tenure, and how we've been able to mobilize even in spite of that. So I also have my personal, like chicas, Afro-Latina, African-American diaspora women that just have our downtime to connect, to create moments of joy, to create moments of love and self-care and everything else. I am privileged to be married to a partner of almost 25 years who has been in this struggle as an artist and actually even as a curator. He works in a community gallery. His name is Agustin Romero, and he wrote a piece for the Aztlán Contemporary Journal of Chicano and Chicano Studies, describing his experience in a community-based gallery that may not be receiving the level of support that it should because it's serving a particular community, and how that often gets co-opted under neoliberal logics. I also am the proud mama of two amazing mujeres, 18 and 19 years old, who are fierce and amazing leaders for racial justice, intersectional justice. And I learn from them every single day since they were yay high. So I think community can be at so many levels, not only in your family networks, your friends networks, your professional networks, but also across sectors, right? The last thing I'll mention is part of the reason that I got this grant from the Robert Wood Johnson on improving the way that we collect national and federal administrative data is that we started the first statewide race, gender, class data policy consortium to add an intersectional lens to the way the state collects data for health records, for education records. So adding things like separating race and ethnicity for Hispanics, but also adding parental educational attainment so that we can understand graduation rates by intersectional social location, and making sure that we add LGBTQ status, all these things that we know we need in order to make these inequities visible, right? So I think, creating community and creating that flexible solidarity is going to plant the seeds for generations to come. Last project I'll mention is that we also started an ethnography of the university, where I had an undergraduate who's a Mela Mays, so I'm glad you mentioned that, who's now a doctoral student, also first generation Latinx, not Afro-Latinx, but Latinx. Look at the curriculum in anthropology, sociology, and history since the 1900s through the present, and discovering the silences around race, gender, and social justice, but also the second part of this ethnography that will be deposited in our institutional repository here at the university is interviews with BIPOC faculty, students, to really flesh out and give texture to that. And it became a community project because now all these other departments are saying, how can I get my undergrads to participate? And this was one of the paradoxes of working during COVID, because you could do all of this digitally, right? Yeah. So again, something that could lead to systemic change and centering the voices of the marginalized communities and empowering us along the way.
It's funny that you say that. Oh, sorry.
Yes, we learn a lot from those stories. Go ahead.
As I say, it's funny that you mentioned those three things, because my anthropology degree technically is race, gender, and social justice, right? That was the program. But the discomfort of white students, and this was, when did I go to grad school? I started in 2004, right? So early 2000s, and the discomfort, particularly of my white peers with a class about whiteness, I mean, they protested it. You know, for a program in race, gender, and social justice, there was, I think, one class about gender. You know, so the ways in which we talk about this being central to our field or central to our analysis, but absolutely no like real training in it. You really have to, I think so many students have to seek that out. And so I appreciate that there's a formal study to say, like, if these things are important to us, this is how it hasn't shown up, you know, and to be able to have that evidence-based data to say, you know, and I had to do it for myself, you know, in my graduate program, like, well, you're saying that this is a program of race, gender, and social justice, but there are very few classes about race. There's literally one class about gender, and the classes about justice I've taken in other departments like philosophy. So I remember you mentioned that as part of your consortia, but, you know, like I had to seek these things out outside of my department, even though the degree was called that. And so I think, you know, these are the things that I want to make sure that we talk about, you know, that we articulate, that we're explicit about, especially in this moment where people are claiming a commitment to diversity, inclusion, and equity. But as you're saying, like, where's the money behind it, right? What is the demonstrated commitment? What is the demonstrated long-term commitment? So I just
Yes.
wanted to acknowledge that that was an issue when I was in graduate school, and nothing has, well, that program doesn't even exist anymore. So I won't say nothing has changed. That doesn't even exist as a track.
I know that there's a lot of questions from the audience, but I don't know if we should transition to that or.
Yeah, we can definitely transition over. So first, I want to thank you both for your engaging discussion thus far. For everyone who's in the audience, so we asked each attendee in the registration, our speakers are renowned Afro-Latinx scholars whose research relates to anthropology, sociology, and public policy. We asked, do you have any questions for them on their work, Afro-Latinx history, and our Afro-Latinx culture? And so out of the many selections, our speakers selected 5 questions to discuss. And so we'll start with the first question, which is, what advice do you have for anyone interested in studying Afro-Latinx culture at the PhD level? And either one of you can answer.
So I'll start and say, do your research and make sure that you're going somewhere where your research interests are supported. I think that is so key in a way in graduate school that isn't, for me at least, was not as necessary in undergrad. But in graduate school, you need to know that you have support, not just for yourself and, you know, the emotional toll that graduate school takes, but that there are people who really intellectually, academically believe in what you want to do and can help you get through to do the research that you actually want to do. So making sure that there's support, like that there's actual support in multiple ways, right? You need the emotional support, you need the academic support, make sure that there is financial support as well. But I would say definitely research. Don't be afraid to talk to students who are in programs that you're interested in to find out what the actual experience is. You know, don't be afraid to talk to professors and see, you know, how they respond to you. Some professors like working with students and some don't. I'll be honest about that, you know. And so you want to make sure that if this is your investment in yourself and your own future, so to make sure that you're finding a good fit and that you have some good options for yourself, not just where you're going where you think there's the highest prestige.
I couldn't agree more with that. And again, even if you end up at one of those places and you just didn't realize, no dejes que nadie robe tu derecho, there will be co-conspirators, even if they are existing outside your department, that can provide you that support. So for instance, if you're at a department where there is no one who has that expertise, that doesn't mean that you can't do it, but you will need your unofficial committee to help you along the way. You still have to navigate the rules of the game wherever you're at, but that preliminary investigation of where is there a supportive place to begin with? Where will I not be ridiculed for pursuing this knowledge production, right, is important. But should you be in one of those programs or you don't have the support, find ways, right, through your peers and even through your professional networks to still do what you want to do and not compromise, because the research that you do will shape the next generation. I'll give one tiny example. So when I came up for tenure, and this was in 2007, my book, Hopeful Girls, Troubled Boys, Race and Gender Disparity in Urban Education, was considered non-scholarly by at least a third of my department that voted against my tenure. And it's interesting that this book is the most highly cited book in my department currently by far to date in the same amount of years. But nevertheless, it made people uncomfortable apparently. But it just goes to speak volumes that even if you're in that situation where you're past your degree and you're going through the tenure process, should there have been some shenanigans where the majority of people vote, you would have had a case, right, for violations of your academic freedom. So just keep all those things in mind. And it's interesting because it was Chicanas, because here in New Mexico, that is the majority of Latinx, who took me aside and told me the same thing that happened to them, right? And so you have co-conspirators all over. Just be aware and look for them. They will help you.
Beautiful. Okay, so the next question that was selected is, do you think Afro-Latinx people struggle to acknowledge part of their identity, either being Latinx or being Black?
I always have strong reactions to this. So my reaction to this is, in my experience, no. I don't think people struggle with their identity. I think other people struggle to understand Black Latinidad, right? I don't think that that is a struggle in and of Black Latinx folks ourselves. It's that other people struggle with that. I don't know how you feel about that, Nancy.
I would agree with you. I mean, in my household, it was very clear, right, that we were both, right? There was no question mark, right? But I think others can't comprehend. So I've had people say, well, but how do you speak Spanish, right? You know, which one are you? And actually silencing your experience because it's not emblematic of what Latinidad is or Blackness is. So I think I agree completely that other people are the ones who struggle with that reality, but we live it every day.
Mm-hmm.
Our children are living it, our families are living it, and it's not a contradiction in any way for us.
Right.
That's why an intersectional lens is so important to understand. Is not either or, it's both and.
Yeah, just to that too, I think the language that we use to describe people is really important. And that has been, my soapbox probably for my entire curatorial career, where words, are so important and we have so few of them on those museum labels. But to get people to not say Black and Latinx, like particularly when they're referring to me, like I'm not Black and Latina, my Latinidad is Black. So it's not a separate thing. And so I understand Latinidad as a Black identity. So it's not in addition to, it's not anything separate, as Nancy is saying. And so just understanding that not everyone's Latinidad is non-Black. So the fact that, we can start from this base position and say like, yep, it's Black. So what's your question? And, and centuries deep in this, again, not even a new identity. So just understanding the history of place, we don't ever question why African-Americanness exists. And so, because I work at an African-American museum, that often is my base to say, well, we don't ask like why African-American people exist. So why would that not be true for the rest of the hemisphere, which shares a history?
Absolutely.
Those are two with perfect points to segue into this next question relating to intersectional lens and also history. So the next question is, how have the fields of Latinx studies and African diaspora studies grown to include Afro-Latinx perspectives?
Wow, that is a big one. It's improving, but there's a long way to go, is my sense. I still hear not only this idea of dichotomizing Latinidad and Blackness, but also the idea that we're going to do a Latinos studies effort or program, and we'll include a module on Blackness. Or when you go and see in our scholarly associations, and I doubt that it's any different in anthropology, in sociology, or any of the associations we belong to, and Afro-Latinas or Afro-Latinos, Afro-Latinx people are only 1%, maybe 0.5% of the members of that organization, and in the sense that, oh, you're statistically insignificant. Well, there's a lot of reasons to understand why that is. People are opting out of Blackness because of a history of anti-Blackness, not only in the sending communities, but in our own communities here. And so I think that there is space for us to engage in intersectional solidarities by centering Afro-Latinidad and indigeneity in our so-called Afro-Latino studies. And I have yet to see that has been happening on a broad scale, but it would make a major difference for who the next generation of knowledge producers are on Latinidad, right? Until that happens. So if we engage in this intersectional, flexible solidarity that says we're going to pivot the center and we are going to center Black experiences in the diaspora of Latinidad, we might get very different programs academically, culturally, politically. I don't know, Ariana, what do you think?
I agree with you. I also am finding a little bit of hope, though, just thinking about my own experience applying to graduate school. I'm a Latin Americanist by training, basically because US-based Latinx programs didn't really exist then, right? That wasn't an option. And so I think now there are different options for what people want to study because there's an increased specificity about our experiences. And so I generally take issue with people saying Afro-Latinx to mean US and all of Latin America. You know, I think that there needs to be some separation in the way that we advocate for Latinx versus Latin American. We can't lose that sense of specificity when we start talking about Black people, right? Because we do have diaspora. It's not as though we don't have terms and structures that can encompass more than just one nation. But I think sometimes with Blackness, we start to homogenize. We start to homogenize people's experiences. And so I found that, you know, the creation of US Latinx studies and really meaning it, and if they don't mean all Latinx, then they are specific, the way that these like Puerto Rican studies, Chicano studies, right, that we're naming the experience that is central and at least providing space for other experiences. And I think about some of the, because I'm not in a university, I think about some of the appointments I see my friends get being shared between departments so that there is someone who's teaching about US Afro-Latinidad in an American Studies department or in a literature department. And I think that's beautiful that we're actually understanding that American studies needs to also include these experiences. And if we're talking about diaspora studies, I've even seen more specificity like Caribbean diaspora versus African diaspora, that we're not assuming a singular diaspora, even when we're naming departments or courses or specializations. And so I think Afro-Latinidad is being understood as the interdisciplinary topic that it should be, and seeing it represented in that way, at least in the academy from, again, this is my network, which is very Afro-Latinx heavy, but where my friends can teach now, different departments where they teach, different universities that are opening up different programs. And so I think, the more we see that diversity happening, the more we understand Afro-Latinidad in the academy as more than just like food and music, the way that I've seen it pigeonholed.
Yeah, great points. So the next question that has been asked is, what resources or activities would you suggest to reinforce the concept of diversity amongst Afro-Latinx descendants?
What, could you repeat the first part? I'm so sorry, I missed the first part. What kind of activities?
So what resources or activities would either of you suggest to reinforce the concept of the diversity amongst Afro-Latinx descendants?
I think, wow. So we have the Afro-Latino Reader, which is just transformational. There's so many spoken word poets that I think are conveying this experience in a beautiful way. So we definitely need to pay attention to that. And then K-12, again, there is an effort to dismantle any curriculum on race and social justice, but there's also opportunities to create rigorous curriculum in K-12 and training and even credentialing requirements for our K-12 teachers. And I would add higher ed to that on Afro-Latinos studies. So I think there's a way that we can get that done by making sure that we are active and engaged in what's happening in K-12, but also in higher ed. I don't know, there's so many resources on race.unm.edu. That's the Institute for the Study of Race and Social Justice in terms of either readings or videos and pedagogical material that could be introduced, but I'm sure Ariana has a lot of resources.
I was just going to say that I agree with everything that you said. And I think that when you have activities or you're drawing on resources, that you just honor the specificity of those things, right? Like when I write, if I'm including myself personally, I am African American and Black Panamanian. There is a particularity of my experience that I'm bringing to this, which is going to be different than Nancy's, which is going to be different than a Black Uruguayan, and so as you're drawing on these artworks, as you're drawing on the works of these spoken word poets, just pay attention to what they're saying and how they place themselves, rather than only placing them within the umbrellas that we want them to be in. So you know, if it is about if it's something about Afro-Latinx, that's fine. Is it really about all Afro-Latinx, or has all of the resources that you have identified, are they all Puerto Rican? Are they all Caribbean? You know, so just making sure that we call the thing a thing, and we honor that, we ourselves honor that Afro-Latinx diversity and how we present these activities and resources. If it's an activity, can we do a little bit of research to know the history of that activity? Is it grounded in place? Is this something that's diasporic in nature? And just really being able to talk about ourselves and our experiences in the diversity in which we exist.
Yeah, thank you both so much. And I included a few links of what was mentioned and just some of your work in the chat for our attendees to take for future reference. The last predetermined question that we have is, how can we inform policy discussions to begin to address Afro-Latinx issues within the United States?
Well, I'll just repeat. Connection is number one. We need a data infrastructure that is not conflating racial status, what social meanings are assigned to your physical appearance, right? And how that shapes your access to resources, with identity. So we need two questions. We need, sure, check as many boxes as you want when you're asked about your racial identity, but we also need a street race question. We could call it socially assigned race, folk race, whatever, that we check one box. And the reason that's important is because that will help us identify who's being denied access to housing, who is not receiving the same treatment when they're at the emergency room, and what happens when you go vote, right? Who's asked for extra ID? So one policy change is the data infrastructure at the federal level, at the state level, at the local level. And this means schools too. If we go to gifted classrooms and we recognize, oh, there's Latinx people here, and we go to the in-school suspension room and we see Latinx people there, I guarantee you, you're going to see most of the people that are in the in-school suspension probably look like us. And many of those that are in the honors classes do not, right? They're probably street race, light skinned or white looking, right? And so again, if we don't transform our data infrastructure to really capture that category of experience, then how are we distributing resources and engaging in equity work? So that's one thing, I think. Another thing is, I've mentioned already, is the policy change for our curriculum and our licensing of teachers at the K-12 level, but also our hiring of faculty. So those are two seemingly small, but really consequential policy changes that could help us address racial equity within our communities.
Yeah, I think that naming is so important. I mean, growing up, I could only check one box, right? I could either be Black or Latino Hispanic. Like you could not check both. And the first census that even allowed people to check two racial categories was 2000. I mean, it's so recent. And so we understand the historical injustices of our communities, but we have not, you know, standardized ways to collect information about race, which we know race is so central to everyone's lived experience. You know, so not putting that and making that important has just sidestepped accountability for all of the things that Nancy's talking about. So if we mean it, then we need to ask the questions that will get us to those answers.
Yeah, thank you both so much. So we have a few minutes for any questions from our attendees on the call. So you're more than welcome to either drop your question in the chat, or you can raise your hand and I'll select you to unmute yourself and ask the question to our panelists themselves. So if anyone has any questions or comments that they'd like to address, feel free to share them at this time.
I just want to say thank you. Thank you. I mean, just sitting here, I think for me, I'm Puerto Rican and I do identify as Afro-Latina. And for many years, I have struggled with my own identity, you know, and still struggle, but I am learning quite a bit now that I didn't have the opportunity to learn before. And so just hearing you all just brings me some hope and brings some tears to my eyes because I don't feel alone, you know. And so it's just, I just want to thank you because it's just more of a personal feeling. So thank you both.
Thank you, Kimberly.
Thank you for being here.
Appreciate your voice and your truth.
Any other questions or thoughts you'd like to share for our panelists this afternoon? Don't we love the awkward silence while waiting for people to say things? Okay, so got a question in the chat. So the question is, how do non-Latinx Black people engage in this work to support, etc.?
Non-Latinx Black people?
Mm-hmm.
I think just honoring Afro-Latinidad as Blackness, first and foremost, you know, just understanding that that's what that means. Afro-Latinx is Black. And I don't know the stats off the top of my head, but it's something like 1 in 10 Black people in the United States right now, right, have foreign roots, are either the children or grandchildren of immigrants. So the Black diversity is a reality, right? We can't assume that Black and African American are synonyms. And so I think for non-Latinx Black folk, just really honoring Black diversity, understanding the marginalization that we feel in US society, it's not different in Latin America. A lot of times people say like race is so different in Latin America. It's not so much, right? There's still a racial hierarchy. There's still a denial and erasure of Blackness. And so just really, I think, honoring Afro-Latinx experiences, elevating them, amplifying when possible, understanding them as experiences of other Black people. And I would say that, you know, where I work, it's not a Latinx museum, it's the National Museum of African American History and Culture. And there has just been nothing but embrace for the work that I do, for the person that I am, the ways in which we can collaborate. And so I think there are models already of how this can work.
I would just say ditto. Thank you. I couldn't agree more. And again, I'm going to resonate with the idea of intersectionality helps that happen, right? By doing exactly what Ariana was talking about, which is recognizing that, yes, we may all be racialized as Black, but we have different experiences, and honoring that by being specific about that place-based experience, about that historical experience, and giving visibility to that and a space for that.
All right, well, great. Well, again, I want to thank you all for logging in and engaging with our speakers. I know for myself personally that the discussion was enlightening and uplifting, especially in these trying times. And I hope that the feelings are mutual for some of you all. As just some quick last minute wrapping up points, this recording of this talk will be published online within the week for further viewing pleasure. And you'll all receive an email from me later today asking for feedback from this event. And so I would like to say just once more, thank you again for your time. Thank you for logging in, and I hope you all have a really great weekend. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having us. It's always so great to see you, Nancy.
Likewise. Gracias, familia. Thank you.
Thank you all.